I'm John McKee, and this is Building with John. In this series, we will be building an acoustic guitar. Welcome back. In this episode, we are going to finish our guitar. So we will finish assembly, we'll add some inlay, we'll do our finishing, and we'll string it up and play it. Now we're ready to inlay a logo on the peg head. So what we're going to do is we're going to inlay this logo in mother of pearl up here on the peg head, just like on this guitar. So I fitted the neck into my neck jig, so it's held nice and stiff with the peg head relatively flat. So when I cut out the cavities, I have a flat surface that's really sturdy. I've also added to my jig a platform that I'll use to cut the mother of pearl. To begin with, I want to figure out what size logo I want to inlay on the peg head. So I printed out different sizes to see how they would fit, in which that logo can fit. So I'm going to cut this logo out of this piece of mother of pearl. It's a perfect size. So I glued my logo to my piece of mother of pearl. I simply used a clear spray adhesive. Now my platform is simply a flat board, nice and stiff, has a small hole in it and a slot. And what that slot will do will allow I'm going to use a little jeweler saw which will fit through the slot to the hole. And then when I cut my mother of pearl, I'm just going to take small cuts and cut along my lines of my pattern that I've glued to my mother of pearl. And you want to be very careful and take little fine cuts when you're doing this, because if you press it too hard, you're going to either break your saw blade or break your mother of pearl, especially if you're doing small, delicate work. So I'm just going to hold it tight, and I'm going to start with some small cuts, and I want to keep my saw up and down, and most of the turning will be turning of the piece, not turning of the saw blade. And there we go. I've removed the V, this little V section from the top of the M. Again, I'm moving the workpiece, not the saw blade, because I find that I'm more likely to twist and snap the saw blade if I turn the blade. So if I turn the workpiece and keep the saw in one place, I have more control. I've cut out around the J, very delicate around this loop. I do see a couple little touch-up spots, so I'm going to touch up with the file to make it smooth. But again, very careful, because I don't want to break any. I have a J and an M. So to cut the hole, or to cut the center of the D out, I've drilled a small hole through the blank, and I threaded the blade through the hole. And I have the center of the D cut. Here's a D. Our logo that's going to be inlaid. Just like that. So to cut the inlay, or cut the cavity for the inlay, I'm going to use this Dremel tool with a flat base, and I'm going to set the depth, and I'm using a 1/32 inch cutting bit. I'm going to set the depth to just slightly under the depth of my inlay pieces. So the first step in cutting the inlay is to first line it up. Now I'm going to do the J and M part, and then I'll put the D in after. So I want to line it up where I want it. I'm going to take this marking gouge, and I'm just going to scrape a line on the just outline it. Okay, I can see that pretty well. So, just going to gently I have it pretty close. Now I'm going to put my inlay back on. Lining it up. And I'm just going to mark where still needs a little remove. And we'll just take a little bit off at a time until it's perfect. And there we go. Our inlays are recessed. They're just slightly proud of the surface. Now let's pull them out of there, and we will use some super glue and glue them in place. So we're just take some super glue and fill in the cavity, and then put the I'm starting with a D here. Make sure I get, and you got to work quick with super glue. And just going to use a piece of scrap to squish it down in place. Seat it all the way. Now let's do the JM. So again, we're just going to fill the cavity completely. And we're going to push this in. So we're just going to seat it down in. Remember, our M broke, so I gotta get this guy back, get this guy in here exact, so nobody will ever know. That is pretty, lines up pretty well. And just squish it all down, seat it all down in, and we let it dry. Want to make sure it's all squished in nice and tight. It's just slightly proud of the surface where I wanted it. Perfect. So we just leave that, let it dry, and then we'll sand it flush, and finish sand the peg head, and we'll be done. Now that the inlay is dry, we're going to go ahead and sand it flush. Then we're going to work through the sandpapers just like we always would. Oh, that looks pretty gorgeous. So you can really see it, what it's going to look like. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of water, and this is what it'll look like when the finish is on there. So you have that golden color from the honey locust with the beautiful inlay mother of pearl. Because my shop is very dusty and I don't really have a good spray setup, I have moved venues, and I will spray my pieces here. I've set up good ventilation with a fan, and I'm just using this nitrocellulose spray lacquer from Stuart McDonald. So just nice, easy coat. I'm starting with a sanding sealer, which is a little thicker than the finish coat. And I've taped off the fingerboard because I don't want any finish on the fingerboard, because I'll oil that. So I'm just going to easy spray coats, just a light coat. I don't want any runs. And go just past the edge and back to it. You immediately see how beautiful that got. So I finished a light coat, one light coat on all the pieces, and I'll let that dry, and I'll come back and continue. So in between coats, I'm just going to lightly sand to knock off any high points. So we have finished our guitar. It's ready to finish. Now we have to do the detail work to assemble it. So for assembly, we have multiple pieces to work on. So on the peg head, we're going to attach our cover to cover our truss rod hole. We'll also attach our pegs so that we can string our guitar. We have to drill holes and ream them out for the pegs, and we'll make a saddle and a nut. So we've drilled the holes through the bridge before we attached it, but we need to go all the way through the top of the guitar. So I'm just going to drill the holes all the way down through gently. We use this device to ream out the holes at the same, it's pre-cut at the same taper as the pegs. So you'll press it into the hole and turn it, and it'll just ream out the hole. And just keep going until you have the peg will sit the desired depth. So see, it goes a little further in, but it's still not right. And I have tape marking where I want it to, how far I want it to go down in. And you can come back and adjust this later too. Alright, so they all sit at the same depth. So we're just going to use these little tiny silver screws. We're going to put some holes the right size and then screw them down in. Now we'll move on to the pegs. Now I want the pegs, we're going to do 3 on a side. Try to get the right side. Okay, so we're going to do 3 on a side, and I want them to fit in between the logo and my cover. But I don't want to interfere with the cover, and I don't want to cover up the logo. So I'm going to evenly space them from about the bottom of that cover to about the bottom of the logo. So 1.25 inches. No. 1.25 inches. And 1/4. Oh, that's now these pegs, they go through, and then there's a screw that goes down from the top to hold it in place. And I'll just drill each pilot hole. Now we will set our nut. So the first thing to do is cut the nut down to the right size, right length. Now this nut is going to be extra high, so we'll have to cut it down. But first we're just going to cut it to length. And I'm just going to do that on the bandsaw. So next, we're just going to use this special file, so it's rough on the edge and it's smooth on the side. And I'm going to just file a flat shelf here up against the fingerboard. If you look, our nut is considerably high. It's like twice as high as it should be. So I took most of it off on the bandsaw, but I'm going to do the rest to get it all smoothed out. I'm going to do it on just a piece of sandpaper on the workbench. So that will go there. That will go there. And we will cut slots in it for the strings. But before we do that, now we're going to rough shape the bridge. Or I mean the saddle. The saddle goes into the bridge. It should fit just in there. So first we're going to cut it to length. So again, I'm just going to mark it and cut it on the bandsaw. There we go. And again, if you look at it, it's way too high. Well, if I can get it out of there, just drop it just a little bit. Again, because I just want to drop a little bit, I'm just going to use the same sandpaper technique. Right, so we're just going to start with it the way it is, a V-shaped file. I'm just going to put a V on each mark. Then we're going to come across, actually not bad. And then once I get the outer two, I'll know the height for the others. And slide the nut out and keep repeating. The one thing to note is the low E is since it's a fat string, you might need to use a file that makes a little wider channel. So here we have our finished guitar. Unfortunately, the camera died as I was doing some of the final work on adjusting the string height, adjusting the nut and the saddle, and I've also added some strap buttons and a clear pick guard because I don't want to cover up the beauty of the wood, so I use a clear pick guard. So there's the front, there's the back, such beautiful wood. So let's play a song so you can see how it sounds. Take my hand, we'll find something new somewhere in this land. Come with me, I'm sure something out there is better to see than these four walls. But they've kept us safe and adventure now calls. Let us run in the sun, let us find a new day, emerge from the shadows that hide us away. Let us run in the sun, let us play like we're youth. If you can't remember, I will remind you. Let us run. Day by day, they all run together when all are the same. So let us find some way we can change this passage of time. You and I, we in the sun. Let us find a new day, emerge from the shadows that hide us away. Let us run in the sun. Let us play like we're youth. If you can't remember, I will remind you. Let us run. Let us run in the sun. Let us find a new day, emerge from the shadows that hide us away. Let us run in the sun. Let us play like we're youth. If you can't remember, I will remind you. Let us run. Let us run. Let us run. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this series on making an acoustic guitar. Look for more videos with other projects.